A paralyzed puppy is about to be put down, and the vet is seconds away from ending its life. When the mama dog does something so unbelievable, it stops everyone in their tracks. What was supposed to be a routine procedure turns into a heart-pounding chase, because this isn't just a dog saving her pup. This is a mother risking everything for a secret no one was ever meant to find out. But why does the puppy have a surgical scar? And what is the gruff old farmer so desperate to keep buried? As one woman digs deeper, the truth will flip everything upside down, and not everyone will make it out unscathed. What is this mother dog really protecting? And what happens when loyalty challenges the law itself? You being here is a reminder. The quiet acts of love and kindness still matter. If you hold space for compassion, you're already part of this community. The storm raged across rural Pennsylvania, its dark clouds turning the afternoon sky as black as midnight. Lightning flashed, illuminating the worn wooden walls of Martin Halbrook's old shed. Inside, Bruna, the German shepherd, lay on a bed of musty hay, her powerful body curled protectively around her single surviving puppy. Thunder crashed overhead as Martin Halbrook's heavy boots crunched on the gravel outside. His weathered face showed no emotion as he peered through the shed's doorway at the mother and pup. Bruna's amber eyes met his, and a low growl rumbled in her throat. "Quiet down," Martin snapped, his voice harsh against the drumming rain. He'd seen right away that something was wrong with the puppy. Its back legs lay motionless, while its front paws paddled weakly in the air. A paralyzed dog was useless to him. The veterinarian's car pulled up the muddy driveway, its wipers fighting against the downpour. Dr. Lenora Keats stepped out, clutching her medical bag close. Her auburn hair was already soaked by the time she reached the shed's entrance. "In here, Dr. Keats," Martin called out, gesturing impatiently. "Just one pup, but it's no good." "Back legs don't work." Lenora's tired eyes took in the scene as she entered. Her wire-rimmed glasses fogged slightly in the humid air. The mother dog's protective posture struck her immediately. She'd seen it countless times before, but something about Bruna's fierce devotion made her pause. "How long ago did she give birth?" Lenora asked, keeping her voice soft and professional, despite the unease settling in her stomach. "Few hours. Rest of the litter was dead." Martin's words were clipped, matter-of-fact. "No point keeping this one alive just to suffer." Lenora knelt slowly, giving Bruna time to accept her presence. The German shepherd's eyes never left her face, tracking every movement. The puppy, small and dark like a chess piece, squirmed against its mother's warm belly. "Let me take a closer look," Lenora murmured, reaching carefully toward the pup. Bruna's growl deepened, but she didn't snap. The veterinarian's gentle hands examined the tiny body, feeling along its spine. The puppy, Rook, as she'd begun thinking of him, showed strong responses in his front legs and alert eyes, but his back legs remained still. Lightning crackled outside as Lenora opened her medical bag. Her hands shook slightly as she prepared the injection, not from the thunder, but from the weight of what she was about to do. In her mind, she saw flashes of another surgery, another mistake, another life she couldn't save. The public scandal that followed had nearly destroyed her career. But this was different. This was mercy, wasn't it? Bruna's muscles tensed as she watched the needle. Her maternal instinct, already on high alert, sensed the threat to her pup. As Lenora moved closer with the syringe, something shifted in the German shepherd's eyes. In a flash of movement that startled both humans, Bruna snatched Rook by the scruff of his neck. Before anyone could react, she bolted past them into the storm. Martin cursed and lurched forward, but the mother dog was already gone, vanishing into the curtain of rain and the darkness of the woods beyond the farm. "Damn it!" Martin slammed his hand against the shed wall. "That dog's gone crazy." But Lenora stood frozen, the unused syringe still in her hand. She stared out into the rain where Bruna had disappeared, her heart pounding. In that moment, watching the mother dog choose to fight for her pup's chance at life, something shifted inside her too. "We should go after them," Martin growled, already moving toward his truck. "That pup won't survive out there, and Bruna's my dog." Lenora didn't respond immediately. The rain soaked through her coat as she stood in the shed doorway, thinking of Bruna's determined eyes, of Rook's will to live despite his paralysis. She thought of her own past, of giving up too easily when things got hard. "Dr. Keats?" Martin's voice cut through her thoughts. "Are you coming or not?" The storm continued to rage, but somewhere in those dark woods, a mother fought to protect her child. Lenora clutched her medical bag tighter, knowing that this moment would change everything, for the dogs, for herself, and for whatever secrets lay hidden on the Halbrook farm. The rain hammered against Bruna's fur as she raced through the darkness, Rook held securely between her teeth. Her paws slipped on the muddy ground, but her powerful legs kept pushing forward, driven by pure maternal instinct. The tiny pup whimpered softly, his wet fur pressed against her mouth. Thunder cracked overhead as Bruna reached the paved road. Her paws skidded on the slick asphalt, and she quickly ducked into the drainage ditch alongside it. The cold water made her gasp, but she kept moving. Her keen ears picked up the sound of tires on wet pavement. Martin's truck, she was sure of it. Gunshots echoed in the distance, making her flatten herself against the ground. Hunters, probably. Even in this weather, some fools would be out there. The sound pushed her deeper into the woods, away from any human presence. The temperature was dropping fast. Bruna could feel it in her bones, and worse, she could feel Rook starting to shiver. Her puppy needed warmth and shelter soon. She paused beneath a large oak tree, scanning the darkness with her amber eyes. There, barely visible through the sheets of rain, was the outline of a small structure. The hunting shack was abandoned, its wooden walls weathered and gray. One window was broken, letting in cold air, but the roof was mostly intact. Bruna nudged the loose door open with her nose and slipped inside. The musty smell of old leaves and decay filled her nostrils, but it was dry. She carefully set Rook down in the corner, furthest from the broken window. Back at the Halbrook farm, Lenora stood in Martin's kitchen, her clothes dripping onto the linoleum floor. Martin paced back and forth, his face red with anger. "Well?" he demanded. "What do we do now?" Lenora took a deep breath, steadying herself. "There's nothing to do," she said, keeping her voice professional and detached. "That pup won't survive the night in this weather. Nature will take its course. And Bruna? She'll probably return once." Lenora swallowed hard. "Once it's over. Dogs are smart that way. They know when to let go." The lie felt bitter in her mouth, but she forced herself to maintain eye contact. Martin studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Suppose you're right," he grumbled. "No point chasing after them in this storm. I'll send you a check for your trouble." Later that night, in her small apartment above the veterinary clinic, Lenora couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Bruna's fierce, protective gaze. She saw Rook's tiny body, fighting to move despite his paralysis. The image of them out there in the cold made her stomach churn with guilt. She got up and went to her desk, pulling out local maps. The woods behind the Halbrook farm stretched for miles, but there were only so many places a dog could find shelter. Old hunting shacks, abandoned barns, natural caves. She marked each possibility with a red pen. The next morning, word spread quickly through the small town. Lenora heard snippets of conversation at the local diner where she stopped for coffee. "Did you hear about Martin Halbrook's dog?" An elderly woman whispered to her friend. "Went crazy and ran off with her crippled pup. In this weather, can you imagine?" "Some other dogs get like that," her friend replied, shaking her head. "Can't accept when something's wrong with their babies. Sad, really." Lenora gripped her coffee cup tighter, fighting the urge to defend Bruna. Instead, she listened carefully to every rumor, every reported sighting. Each piece of information could help her track them down. Back in the hunting shack, Bruna curled tightly around Rook, sharing her body heat. The pup's front legs paddled against her belly as he nursed, but his back legs remained still. Yet there was strength in him. She could feel it in the way he fought to move, in his determined little sounds. She remembered the needle in the veterinarian's hand, remembered the threat she'd sensed. But there had been something else in that woman's eyes, something different from Martin's cold dismissal. Still, she couldn't trust any humans now. Her pup's life depended on her alone. The rain continued to fall outside their shelter, but Bruna's resolve only grew stronger. She would protect Rook, would help him survive no matter what it took. She didn't understand why his legs didn't work, but she understood love. And love, she knew, could overcome anything. In her clinic, Lenora began making quiet preparations. She studied articles about canine paralysis, ordered special supplies, and mapped out possible search patterns. She knew she was risking her already fragile professional reputation, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was meant to help these two survivors. "Just hold on," she whispered to the empty room, thinking of Bruna and Rook in their unknown hiding place. "I'll find you, and this time, I'll do the right thing." Through the clinic's window, Martin Halbrook's truck kicked up gravel as it screeched into the parking lot. Lenora's stomach tightened. She'd been dreading this moment. The bell above the door jangled as Martin burst in, his weathered face flushed with anger. "Something ain't right about all this," he growled, planting his hands on the reception desk. "That dog's too smart to just disappear. She's got help." Lenora kept her expression neutral, though her heart raced. "What are you suggesting, Mr. Holbrook?" "I'm suggesting you know more than you're telling." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "No one's seen hide nor hair of them, not even tracks. It ain't natural." "Dogs can be surprisingly resourceful when protecting their young," Lenora replied, shuffling papers to hide her trembling hands. "Especially German shepherds." Miles away in the hunting shack, Bruna proved those words true. She discovered a pile of old hunting clothes in a corner, dragging the least moldy pieces to make a nest for Rook. The fabric helped keep him warm while she ventured out for food. Hunting was difficult with her milk-heavy body, but Bruna managed to catch 2 rabbits that morning. She ate one quickly, knowing she needed strength to produce milk for Rook. The other she buried outside the shack for later. Each time she returned from hunting, she checked on Rook obsessively, cleaning him and stimulating his legs as if trying to wake them up. When he nursed, she watched his determined attempts to move, his front legs working while his back ones remained still. The following afternoon, Lenora set out on her 3rd hiking trip of the week. Her backpack held medical supplies and dog food, just in case. She'd mapped out a careful grid pattern, examining every promising location. Near a fallen oak, she found her first real clue: distinctive claw marks on the trunk, too high for a wild animal. Bruna had marked her territory. Lenora's trained eye spotted more signs: tufts of tan fur caught on brambles, scattered feathers from a recent kill. "You're one clever girl," Lenora muttered, noting the direction of the tracks. But before she could follow them further, a truck engine rumbled in the distance. Animal Control, their logo visible through the trees. Martin had made good on his threats. He'd reported Bruna as a dangerous animal, claiming she'd attacked him during her escape. Lenora ducked behind a thick pine as the truck passed, watching 2 officers scan the area with tranquilizer guns ready. "Chief says the dog's probably rabid," one officer said. "Why else would she grab that pup and run?" "Owner wants her put down soon as we find her," his partner replied. "Says she's too unpredictable now." Lenora waited until they moved on, her mind racing. She'd assumed Martin just wanted the paralyzed pup gone, but his determination to find Bruna seemed excessive. Something about this situation wasn't adding up. As dusk approached, Bruna demonstrated exactly why she was so hard to catch. When she heard the animal control truck, she immediately led a false trail, deliberately dragging her paw through mud, heading east, before doubling back west through a stream to mask her scent. She'd done this before, Lenora realized. This wasn't just animal instinct. This was learned behavior. The German shepherd moved with purpose, using every trick to protect her pup. She stuck to rocky ground that wouldn't hold prints. She traveled under dense brush that wouldn't snag her fur. When helicopters buzzed overhead, she froze in the shadows, perfectly still until they passed. Watching through binoculars from a safe distance, Lenora felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Bruna's actions showed planning, strategy, and an almost military precision. No ordinary farm dog should have these skills. Back at the shack, Bruna's maternal dedication was equally remarkable. She'd created a system for caring for Rook despite his disability. She'd dug a shallow depression in the dirt floor that cradled him securely while she was gone. She kept him meticulously clean, preventing the sores that often plagued paralyzed animals. Most striking was her apparent understanding of his condition. She didn't treat him as helpless, but rather encouraged his attempts to move. When he tried to drag himself with his front legs, she stood nearby, offering support without taking over. She seemed to know exactly how much help to give. Lenora documented everything she observed, her veterinary training warring with what she was seeing. This level of intelligence and adaptation went beyond normal canine behavior. Even for a German Shepherd, Bruna's actions suggested something more, something that made Martin Halbrook's intense interest suddenly more suspicious. As night fell, Lenora reluctantly headed back to town, her notebook filled with observations. She had more questions than answers, but one thing was certain. Bruna was not just acting on instinct. Every move the dog made showed intelligence, purpose, and a deep understanding of both survival and rehabilitation. The mystery of why Martin wanted her destroyed only deepened. Lenora's boots crunched through frost-covered leaves as she approached the hunting shack. Her heart raced with anticipation, but the clearing was eerily quiet. Too quiet. She pressed her hand against the weathered door, and it creaked open to reveal an empty interior. "Bruna?" she called softly, though she already knew there would be no response. The air inside held only the lingering scent of dog and earth. Weak sunlight filtered through gaps in the wooden walls, illuminating signs of recent occupation. Lenora knelt to examine the shallow depression in the dirt floor where Rook had clearly been nestled. Next to it lay a cloth stained with small spots of blood. Her veterinary instincts kicked in as she carefully inspected the fabric. "Fresh blood, but not too much," she murmured, relief washing over her. "No signs of infection." She noticed something else interesting. The blood spots were accompanied by tiny pinpricks, as if from repeated needle-like claws. "He's been trying to move." Retrieving a flashlight from her backpack, Lenora conducted a thorough examination of the makeshift den. Bruna had created an impressive nursery with scattered bits of old blankets forming a nest. Near one wall, she discovered several small depressions where the mother dog had buried food for later. A movement caught her eye. A piece of paper skittering across the floor in the draft. She grabbed it, recognizing it as a fragment of an old newspaper. The date was from 6 months ago, but the text was too faded to read. Lenora's thoughts raced back to her examination of Rook just before Bruna fled. She'd noticed something odd about his paralysis then, but hadn't had time to investigate properly. Now, sitting in this abandoned shelter, she pulled out her tablet and accessed her digital veterinary records. "Typical birth-related paralysis shows specific patterns," she said to herself, scrolling through case files. "The trauma usually affects multiple systems, not just the lower spine. But Rook's vital signs were strong, his upper body perfectly normal." She remembered something else, a detail that had nagged at her subconscious. During that brief examination, she'd felt a slight ridge on Rook's belly. At the time, she dismissed it as an umbilical scar. But now... "No newborn should have a surgical scar," she whispered, the realization sending a chill down her spine. "What exactly happened to you, little one?" Back at her clinic that evening, Lenora dove deeper into her research. She pulled up every veterinary record she could find connected to the Halbrook farm. Most were routine, vaccinations, minor injuries, nothing unusual. But then she noticed a pattern. Over the past 5 years, Martin had brought in several dogs with unusual conditions, all German Shepherds. 3 cases of unexplained neurological symptoms, she noted, writing in her journal. All dogs disappeared or were reportedly euthanized elsewhere. She frowned, tapping her pen against the desk. Why wouldn't he let me handle those cases? Something about the timing bothered her. She expanded her search to include news articles about the Halbrook family. Most were mundane local stories until one headline caught her eye. Local scientist faces ethics investigation. The article was about Martin's brother, Dr. James Halbrook, and dated just before the strange dog cases began. Lenora's hands trembled as she read. Dr. James Halbrook had been a neuroscience researcher, specialized in spinal cord regeneration. His lab had been shut down amid accusations of unauthorized animal testing, but he had disappeared before authorities could question him. The same time, Martin started bringing in dogs with neurological issues, Lenora breathed, connecting the dots. She glanced at the photo of Dr. Halbrook in the article, noting the family resemblance to Martin. The same hard eyes, the same stern set to the jaw. The pieces were falling into place, forming a disturbing picture. Rook's surgical scar, his specific paralysis, Bruna's military-like training and protective behavior. None of it fit with Martin's story about a simple farm dog and her injured pup. Lenora sat back in her chair, the weight of her discoveries settling heavily on her shoulders. This wasn't just about saving a paralyzed puppy anymore. She was uncovering something much darker, something that Martin Halbrook had gone to great lengths to keep hidden. Her computer chimed with an incoming email. It was from Animal Control, requesting her professional opinion on dealing with the dangerous mother dog. Lenora stared at the screen, knowing her response could change everything. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she considered her next move, the gravity of the situation sinking in. The truth about Rook's condition and Bruna's past was there, hidden in old records and suspicious timelines. Now she just had to prove it, before Martin Halbrook could silence the living evidence of his family's secrets. The soft glow of Lenora's computer screen illuminated her face as she dug deeper into the Halbrook family history. Her eyes burned from hours of staring at old newspaper archives and public records, but she couldn't stop. Not when each new discovery pointed to something more sinister than she'd imagined. Dr. Lyle Halbrook, she muttered, scanning a yellowed news clipping from 5 years ago. Brother to Martin Halbrook, specialized in experimental spinal surgery. Her finger traced the grainy photograph of a stern-faced man in a lab coat, his resemblance to Martin unmistakable. The article detailed the shocking closure of Lyle's research facility just outside of town. Claims of unauthorized experiments, missing animals, and ethical violations filled paragraph after paragraph. But what caught Lenora's attention was a specific detail buried near the end. Several German shepherds believed to be used in spinal cord regeneration trials were never recovered during the raid. Lenora's hand trembled as she reached for her notebook. She flipped to her observations about Rook's unusual paralysis and the surgical scar. It can't be coincidence, she whispered. The timing, the breed, the specific type of injury. A sudden noise outside her window made her jump. Through the darkness, she could make out the shape of a large dog slinking across her backyard. Her heart raced as she recognized Bruna's distinctive gait. The German shepherd was heading toward town, toward the Halbrook farm. She must be desperate for food, Lenora realized. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat and car keys. The drive to the Halbrook farm took 10 minutes. She killed her headlights as she approached, parking behind a stand of trees. In the moonlight, she could see Bruna's shadow moving carefully around the old barn. The mother dog was thin, but moving with purpose, nose working the ground for anything edible. A light flicked on in the farmhouse. Lenora's breath caught as Martin's silhouette appeared in the window. She watched him reach for something long and metallic, a rifle. Her hands clenched the steering wheel as he disappeared from view. No, she breathed, willing Bruna to run. As if hearing her thoughts, the dog's head snapped up. In an instant, she vanished into the shadows, just as Martin's heavy boots crunched on the gravel driveway. Lenora slouched lower in her seat, watching Martin stalk the property's edge with his rifle ready. He paused near where Bruna had been, shining a flashlight on the ground. Something about his posture spoke of more than just annoyance at a stray dog. There was fear in his movements, desperation in how thoroughly he searched the shadows. When he finally went back inside, Lenora waited another 20 minutes before carefully approaching the barn. In the weak moonlight, she could see what had drawn Bruna, scattered pieces of kibble near an overturned feeding bowl. But something else caught her eye. Half hidden behind old farm equipment were several steel traps, their teeth gleaming dully in the darkness. "He's not trying to catch her," Lenora realized with horror. "He's trying to kill her." Back at her clinic, she spread out everything she'd gathered about the Halbrook brothers. News articles, veterinary records, and her own notes painted a disturbing picture. Lyle's research had focused on reversing paralysis through experimental surgery. When funding was cut, he'd continued his work illegally, using stolen animals as test subjects. Bruna must have been one of them, Lenora concluded, studying a photo of the German Shepherd. The dog's protective behavior, her military-like training, her incredible intelligence, it all suggested specialized handling. But Rook! She stared at her notes about the puppy's condition. The surgical scar was too precise, too professional. And his paralysis. It wasn't random trauma from a difficult birth. It was targeted, specific, exactly the kind of injury Lyle had been trying to cure. "Rook isn't her biological puppy," Lenora whispered, the truth finally crystallizing. "He's an experiment. Bruna must have found him during the raid, when everything fell apart. She took him, protected him." The pieces fit together with terrible clarity. Martin must have taken them in to protect his brother's secrets, keeping them isolated on the farm. But when Rook's condition became obvious, he'd called Lenora in, expecting her to quietly euthanize the evidence. A notification popped up on her computer. Another alert about Martin's request to have animal control deal with the dangerous dog. Lenora's jaw set as she read it. She knew what she had to do, but proving it would be dangerous. Martin had already shown he was willing to go to extreme measures to protect his family's dark secrets. Her gaze fell on an old photograph from the newspaper showing Lyle's research facility before its closure. In the background, barely visible, was a familiar shape, a German Shepherd with Bruna's distinctive markings wearing a research collar. The final proof she needed. Lenora began gathering her evidence, knowing she had to move carefully. Somewhere in the darkness, Bruna was still protecting Rook, while Martin prowled the woods with his rifle, determined to silence them both. The race to save them had become more urgent than ever. Lenora sat in her dimly lit office, staring at old newspaper clippings spread across her desk. The yellowed headlines brought back memories she'd tried hard to forget. 5 years ago, she had been one of the most promising veterinary surgeons in Philadelphia. That was before everything fell apart. Her hands trembled slightly as she touched a particular article. "Negligence claims filed against Rising Star Vet," the headline screamed. The details of that day rushed back, sharp and painful. A routine surgery on a prize show dog had gone terribly wrong. She'd made a split-second decision, tried an experimental technique to save the animal's life. Instead, a complication set in. The dog died 2 days later. "I was so sure I could save him," she whispered to the empty room. The resulting investigation had been brutal. Her license was suspended for 18 months. Worse than the professional consequences was the crushing weight of guilt and self-doubt that followed. Lenora removed her wire-rimmed glasses and pressed her fingers against tired eyes. Coming back to her hometown had seemed like the safest choice. A small practice, routine cases, nothing that could go wrong. No more risks, no more tough calls. Until Bruna and Rook. She pulled out the photograph she'd taken of Rook's surgical scar. The image of the tiny German Shepherd pup, paralyzed but fighting to live, haunted her. And Bruna, the fierce determination in those amber eyes reminded her of why she'd become a vet in the first place. "I can't just walk away from this," she said aloud, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. Rising from her desk, Lenora gathered her emergency medical kit and a few supplies. Recent reports placed Bruna and Rook in the area of Old Miller's farm, abandoned for years but still standing. The spring evening was cool as she drove the back roads, her headlights cutting through growing darkness. She parked a quarter-mile from the farm and continued on foot. The old barn loomed ahead, its weathered boards silver in the moonlight. Moving carefully, she circled the structure, looking for signs. There, fresh paw prints in the mud, leading to a gap between loose boards. Lenora crouched near the entrance, listening. Soft rustling came from inside, followed by a quiet whimper. Her heart quickened. They were here. Using her flashlight on its lowest setting, she peered through the gap. Bruna lay in a nest of old hay, her body curled protectively around Rook. The pup's hind legs still showed no movement, but his eyes were bright and alert. Bruna's head snapped up at the light, a low growl rumbling in her throat. Lenora quickly switched off the flashlight. "It's okay," she whispered, though she knew they couldn't hear her from this distance. "I'm not here to hurt you." She watched as Bruna gently nuzzled Rook, checking him over. The bond between them was extraordinary. Not just maternal instinct, but something deeper, as if Bruna understood exactly what Rook had been through and was determined to give him a different life. Sitting back on her heels, Lenora felt tears prick at her eyes. How long had she hidden behind her past mistakes, letting fear dictate her choices? These two had suffered far worse, yet they fought on. Bruna could have abandoned Rook, saved herself. Instead, she'd chosen the harder path. "I've been so afraid of making another mistake," Lenora murmured. "But maybe the biggest mistake is not trying at all." She knew she couldn't approach them yet. Bruna was too protective, too traumatized to trust easily. But watching them now, Lenora felt something shift inside her, a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. These two needed her, and she needed them just as much. Taking out her notebook, she began documenting everything she could see about Rook's condition. The pup's muscle tone was holding, suggesting the paralysis might not be permanent. With proper treatment, there might be hope. But first, she had to gain Bruna's trust and uncover the truth about their connection to the Halbrook brothers. "I'm going to help you," she promised quietly. "Both of you, whatever it takes." Lenora stayed until the moon was high, making notes and planning her next steps. When she finally left, her steps were lighter, more determined. The weight of her past failures felt less crushing. In their place was something new, hope, and the fierce desire to protect these two survivors who had awakened her healing spirit once again. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Halbrook farm as Martin stood in his study, hands trembling as he held the papers he'd found in Lenora's car. She'd left them visible on the passenger seat during her last visit, and something had made him look. Now he knew. She'd been digging into his past, into Lyle's past, into everything they'd worked so hard to bury. News clippings about the lab raid, old veterinary records, notes about surgical procedures that no one was ever supposed to know about, his brother's experiments, his own role in hiding the evidence. "No," he growled, crumpling the papers in his fist. "Not now. Not after all these years." The sound of tires on gravel made him jerk. Through the window, he saw Lenora's car pulling up the drive. She was back, probably to snoop around some more. His heart raced as panic clawed at his throat. The shed. There were still records hidden there, things he'd never destroyed. If she found those... Martin grabbed a gas can from the garage and hurried across the yard. The old wooden shed stood dark and silent, filled with memories he'd tried to forget. He splashed gasoline along the walls, his movements frantic and jerky. The fumes made his eyes water. Or maybe those were tears he refused to acknowledge. Just as he struck the match, a flash of movement caught his eye. A large dog, Bruna, slipping through the shadows near the tree line. She'd been coming back for the food scraps he knew she'd been stealing. Now she was heading straight for the shed. "Perfect," he muttered. 2 problems solved at once. The match fell, Flames erupted, catching quickly on the gasoline-soaked wood. Martin backed away, watching as orange fingers of fire climbed the walls. Smoke billowed into the darkening sky. Inside the shed, Bruna had already grabbed Rook in her mouth when the flames blocked the entrance. She spun in circles, searching for another way out. But the windows were too small and too high. The smoke grew thicker, making her eyes burn. Rook whimpered softly. Lenora had just stepped out of her car when she saw the smoke. Her heart stopped for a moment, then started racing as she spotted Martin walking away from the burning shed. "No," she whispered. Then she heard it, a dog's panicked bark from inside the inferno. She ran, her lab coat flying behind her. "Martin!" she screamed. "There are animals in there!" He turned, his face ghostly in the firelight. "Stay back!" It's too late. But Lenora was already charging toward the shed. The heat hit her like a wall as she neared the entrance. Flames licked at the doorframe, and thick smoke poured out. She pulled her coat over her nose and mouth. "Bruna!" she called. "Bruna! Where are you?" A bark answered her, muffled by smoke but close. Lenora dropped to her hands and knees where the air was clearer. The floor was hot through her jeans as she crawled forward. Through the smoke, she made out Bruna's shape. The dog was pressed against the far wall. Rook still carefully held in her mouth. Their eyes met, human and canine, and in that moment, something passed between them. Trust, understanding, a shared determination to survive. "Come to me," Lenora called, reaching out. "That's it, girl. Follow my voice." Bruna inched forward, staying low like Lenora. A burning beam crashed behind them, sending sparks flying. Rook squealed in fear. "Almost there," Lenora encouraged, even as the smoke made her cough. Her eyes streamed tears, and her lungs burned. Just a few more feet. Finally, Bruna reached her. Lenora wrapped one arm around the dog's powerful shoulders, guiding her toward the exit. The doorway was nearly engulfed now, but it was their only chance. "Ready?" Lenora whispered. "Together." They burst through the flames, Lenora using her body to shield Bruna and Rook as much as possible. They tumbled onto the grass, rolling to extinguish any sparks on their clothes and fur. Martin stood frozen, watching as Lenora checked both animals for injuries. Bruna was missing some fur, and all three of them were covered in soot, but they were alive. The dog kept Rook close, but her eyes stayed fixed on Lenora with an intensity that spoke volumes. "You could have killed them," Lenora said, her voice raw from smoke and emotion. She stood facing Martin. "Was that the plan? Destroy the evidence and them along with it?" "You don't understand," Martin started, but his voice cracked. Behind him, the shed collapsed in a shower of sparks. Lenora gathered her medical kit from her car, her hands shaking but determined. As she began treating Bruna and Rook for smoke inhalation, she knew there was no turning back. She was committed now to uncovering the truth, to protecting these two survivors, to following her heart instead of her fears. The flames continued to dance against the darkening sky, destroying the past, but illuminating the path forward. The heat from the collapsing shed washed over them in waves. Lenora knelt beside Bruna and Rook, her hands gentle as she checked their breathing. The crack of a shotgun being cocked froze her in place. "Step away from them." Martin's voice was cold and steady. He emerged from the shadows, the weapon trained on Lenora. "You're trespassing on private property." Lenora slowly raised her hands, her heart hammering. "Martin, please, think about what you're doing." "I'm protecting what's mine." His fingers tightened on the trigger. Soot and ash drifted around them like dark snow. "Should have known you'd keep poking around where you don't belong." "I know about Lyle's lab," Lenora said, watching Martin's face twitch at his brother's name. "About the experimental surgeries. That's where Bruna came from, isn't it? She escaped during the raid, and you've been hiding her ever since." Martin's expression darkened. "You don't know anything." "I know Rook has surgical scars no newborn should have. I know your brother disappeared after the lab was shut down, and I know you're trying to cover it all up." Lenora's voice grew stronger. But burning evidence won't change what happened. Shut up! Martin took a step forward, his finger white on the trigger. You think you're so smart playing detective? You're nothing but a washed-up vet who couldn't even save one dog without messing it up. Behind Lenora, Bruna growled low in her throat. She had set Rook down gently in the grass and was tensing her muscles, reading the threat in Martin's stance. Those experiments were wrong, Lenora continued, trying to keep his attention on her. But we can still do the right thing now. Let me help Rook. He deserves a chance. Like you helped that show dog? Martin sneered. The one that died on your table? That's what ended your career, isn't it? Lenora flinched but held her ground. Yes, I made a mistake, and I've lived with it every day since. But this isn't about me. It's about an innocent pup and a mother who would do anything to protect him. Martin's laugh was harsh. Mother? She's not even his real mother. Just another failed experiment that got attached to a reject. The words had barely left his mouth when Bruna launched herself through the air. Her powerful body slammed into Martin's chest, sending the shotgun flying. They crashed to the ground together, Martin's cry of surprise cut short as the wind was knocked from his lungs. Lenora dove for the weapon, snatching it away and emptying the chambers with shaking hands. Bruna stood over Martin, her teeth bared inches from his face, a low growl rumbling in her chest. Bruna, Lenora called softly. It's okay, girl. I've got him. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the night. Headlights swept across the scene as a car pulled up, and Lenora's assistant, Amy, jumped out. Dr. Keats, she shouted, I followed you when you ran out of the clinic. I called the police when I saw the fire. 2 police cars arrived moments later, their red and blue lights painting the smoke-filled air. Officers quickly took control of the scene, handcuffing Martin as he spat threats and accusations. Bruna returned to Rook's side, nuzzling him gently. The pup whimpered and pressed closer to her warmth. Lenora watched them, tears mixing with the soot on her face. You'll need to come down to the station, one officer told her. We'll want your statement about everything you've discovered. Lenora nodded, then gestured to Bruna and Rook. They need medical attention first. Smoke inhalation, possible burns. We'll escort you to your clinic, the officer agreed. And Dr. Keats? Good work. We've been trying to build a case against the Halbrooks for years. As Martin was led away in handcuffs, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The burning shed illuminated his face one last time, showing not the tough, controlling man he'd pretended to be, but someone broken by the weight of his own secrets. Lenora knelt beside Bruna, who allowed her to stroke her head for the first time. Let's get you both somewhere safe, she whispered. It's over now. You're free. The German shepherd's amber eyes met hers with that same fierce intelligence that had first caught Lenora's attention. In them, she saw not just an experiment or a stray, but a mother who had fought against all odds to protect her chosen child. Blood meant nothing compared to the power of that love. Together, they walked away from the burning ruins of the past, leaving Martin's dark secrets to crumble with the ashes of the shed. Bruna carried Rook with the same gentle determination she'd shown since the beginning, but now her steps were lighter, unburdened by the need to run. The morning after the fire, Lenora's small veterinary clinic buzzed with quiet activity. She had converted the recovery room into a temporary home for Bruna and Rook, complete with soft blankets and a heating pad for the injured pup. Bruna lay curled protectively around Rook, her amber eyes tracking every movement as Lenora cleaned their smoke-induced injuries. Easy there, Lenora murmured, applying a cooling salve to a minor burn on Bruna's paw. The German shepherd no longer growled at her touch, though her muscles remained tense. You're both safe now. Dr. Sarah Chen, a veterinary neurologist from Pittsburgh, arrived later that morning. She studied the x-rays Lenora had taken, her expression thoughtful. The surgical work is precise, Dr. Chen said, pointing to the faint marks along Rook's spine. Whatever they were attempting in that lab, they knew what they were doing. The good news is, I don't see permanent damage to the nerve pathways. Lenora's heart leaped, So there's hope? More than hope. With proper physical therapy and time, I believe Rook could regain significant mobility. The paralysis appears to be primarily inflammation-based, likely a response to the experimental procedure. As they discussed treatment options, Bruna's ears perked up, as if understanding the importance of their conversation. She gave Rook a gentle nudge with her nose, earning a small tail wag from the pup. Over the next few weeks, Lenora established a daily routine. Every morning began with gentle massage therapy on Rook's legs, carefully working the muscles to prevent atrophy. Bruna watched these sessions intently, sometimes mimicking Lenora's movements with her own nose, nuzzling Rook's legs. "Good boy," Lenora praised as she stretched each limb. "That's it, just like that." The breakthrough came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Lenora was recording one of their therapy sessions on her phone when Rook's back leg twitched. Not the usual reflex response, but a deliberate movement. She gasped, nearly dropping the phone. "Did you see that?" she whispered to Bruna, who had already noticed and was whining excitedly. "He moved!" All on his own. Lenora quickly sent the video to Dr. Chen, her hands shaking with emotion. This small victory felt enormous, not just for Rook, but for her own journey of redemption. Word spread through the small town. The story of the devoted mother dog and her paralyzed pup had already captured local attention, but now it transformed into something more hopeful. People began stopping by the clinic, offering encouragement and support. Mrs. Peterson, whose prize-winning show dog had died during Lenora's failed surgery years ago, surprised everyone by bringing homemade dog treats. "I've been following Rook's progress on your clinic's social media," she said softly. "Nah, what you're doing. It's beautiful." Lenora swallowed hard, remembering the pain of that terrible day. "I'm so sorry about Duchess," she managed. "I know you did everything you could," Mrs. Peterson replied, touching Lenora's arm. "Sometimes things just happen. But look at you now. You never gave up on helping animals." The interaction left Lenora feeling lighter, as if a heavy weight had finally begun to lift from her shoulders. Bruna's transformation was equally remarkable. The once defensive dog now greeted clinic staff with cautious tail wags. She allowed the veterinary technicians to help with Rook's therapy, seeming to understand they were all working toward the same goal. During evening sessions, Lenora often found herself talking to both dogs, sharing her own story of failure and redemption. "We're all getting a second chance," she told them as Rook worked to move his legs in the small therapy pool. "Sometimes the hardest part is believing we deserve it." Rook's progress, though slow, was steady. Each tiny movement was celebrated, a toe wiggling here, a knee bending there. Lenora documented everything, building a case study that could potentially help other animals with similar injuries. The local newspaper ran a feature story about the clinic's work with Rook, complete with photos of Bruna assisting in therapy sessions. Where once there had been whispers about Lenora's past mistakes, now there were conversations about her dedication and skill. "You've created quite the rehabilitation program here," Dr. Chen commented during a follow-up visit. "Have you considered expanding your focus to include more special needs cases?" Lenora looked at Bruna, who was demonstrating how to army crawl to an eager Rook. The pup was trying to mimic her movements, his back legs showing more strength each day. "I think," she said slowly, "that's exactly what I meant to do." That evening, as sunset painted the clinic walls in warm gold, Lenora sat on the floor beside her patients. Bruna rested her head in Lenora's lap, something unimaginable just weeks ago, while Rook practiced pushing himself up on his strengthening legs. "Look how far we've come," Lenora whispered, scratching behind Bruna's ears. The German shepherd sighed contentedly, her fierce protective instincts now tempered by trust. Together, they watched Rook wobble and struggle, but never quit, a living symbol of perseverance and the healing power of unconditional love. 6 months passed like pages turning in a beloved book. The crisp autumn morning found Lenora standing in her clinic's doorway, watching as Rook bounded across the leaf-strewn yard. His gait wasn't perfect, a slight wobble here, a minor stumble there, but he moved with the joyful enthusiasm of any young dog discovering the world. "Look at him go," Lenora murmured to Bruna, who sat attentively at her side. The mother dog's tail wagged slowly, her amber eyes never leaving her adopted pup. Though her protective instincts remained strong, they had softened into something more peaceful, more content. The small brass nameplate on the clinic's front door now read, "Dr. Lenora Keats, Specialized Veterinary Care and Rehabilitation." What had once been a quiet practice had transformed into a beacon of hope for special needs animals throughout the region. The waiting room walls displayed before and after photos of success stories, with Rook's journey featured prominently. "Dr. Keats," called Mrs. Wilson, arriving with her three-legged retriever for their weekly therapy session. "I saw Rook's latest video on your clinic's page. Such amazing progress." Lenora smiled, remembering how far they'd all come. The viral video of Rook's first independent steps had brought attention from veterinary journals and even a few television stations. But more importantly, it had brought hope to other pet owners facing difficult decisions. Inside her office, adoption papers for both dogs sat framed on her desk, a reminder that sometimes the best families are the ones we choose. Bruna had settled into domestic life with surprising ease, becoming the clinic's unofficial therapy assistant. She had an uncanny ability to calm nervous patients, as if sharing her own story of survival and love. One sunny afternoon, Lenora drove out to the old hunting shack where their journey had truly begun. Bruna and Rook sat in the back seat, Rook's head hanging out the window, tongue flapping in the breeze. The hunting shack looked different now, less forbidding, more like a landmark of transformation. With careful hands, Lenora mounted a simple bronze plaque beside the door. It read, "Where Hope Found Shelter," in honor of a mother's love and the courage to believe in second chances. She had debated the wording for weeks, wanting to capture the essence of what had happened here without revealing too much of their private story. "What do you think?" she asked her canine family. Bruna sniffed the plaque thoroughly, then pressed her nose against Lenora's hand. Approval in her own way. Back at home, their evening routine had become a source of quiet joy. Rook chased butterflies in the fenced backyard, his movements growing more coordinated with each passing day. Sometimes he still stumbled, but he always got back up, his spirit undiminished. Bruna watched from her favorite spot on the porch, alert but relaxed, the hard edges of her past softened by security and love. The transformation wasn't just physical. Lenora noticed how Rook's personality had blossomed. The silent, struggling pup had become a playful, confident young dog. He particularly loved the children who came to visit the clinic, seeming to understand that his story gave them hope for their own pets. Word of the miracle pup continued to spread. Lenora's clinic now had a waiting list for rehabilitation cases, and she had hired 2 additional staff members to help manage the growing practice. But she never forgot the lessons learned during those desperate days in the woods about trust, courage, and the healing power of unconditional love. One evening, as autumn painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Lenora sat on her porch swing with a cup of tea. Bruna dozed at her feet while Rook played with his favorite rope toy nearby. The sound of his paws scampering across the wooden boards filled her heart with gratitude. "We did it, didn't we?" she whispered to Bruna, who opened one eye and thumped her tail in agreement. The German Shepherd had grown more silver around her muzzle, but her dedication to Rook never wavered. She still checked on him every night, still guided him when his coordination faltered, still loved him with the same fierce devotion that had driven her to save his life. Lenora felt the last pieces of her old guilt and fear finally release their hold. The failed surgery that had nearly ended her career now seemed like a distant chapter in a different book. She had found her true calling, not just treating animals, but believing in their capacity to overcome seemingly impossible odds. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the yard, Rook trotted up to join them on the porch. He flopped down between Bruna and Lenora, perfectly content. The three of them sat together, a family forged by circumstance and choice, each one healed by the love they had found in each other. Thank you for watching. If even one moment stayed with you, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be here tomorrow with another story that speaks to the heart.